Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're the place you come to really get under the surface, behind the headlines shaping things. Today, we are tackling a subject that, well, it always seems to stir things up on Capitol Hill. We're talking about the funding for NPR and PBS, specifically the debate happening right now in the Senate. And our guide for this is a really solid piece from Axios called NPR and PBS, The Funding Debate in the Senate. It frames this not just as, a budget fight, but as something deeper. It's about different ways of thinking about media, what public service means, and, taxpayer money.
That's a great way to put it. I mean, public broadcasting in the U.S., it's got this long history, right? And the funding part, it's almost always been a point of contention, sometimes more heated than others. What Axios really helps us do here is understand the specific things driving this particular round of debate in the Senate. So our plan today is to break down the arguments, the key facts, everything presented in that Axios article. We want to give you a clear, balanced picture of what's being discussed so you can really grasp the different angles. We're not taking sides, just laying out the info.
Okay, let's unpack this then. What exactly is on the table here, and why, according to Axios, is this bubbling up so strongly now?
Right. Axios points to a couple of key things pushing this forward again. First, there's just this broader context, a big push in parts of Congress for fiscal conservatism. Cutting spending is high on the agenda. And so, naturally, federal money for public broadcasting, which mostly flows through the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, the CPB, it comes under the microscope. The article does note something important, though. This federal funding is usually a pretty small slice of the pie for NPR and PBS stations, maybe, 10 to 15% of their total budgets. But for those who want to defund it, it often becomes a symbolic target, a place to make a statement about spending priorities.
Okay. So it's partly the general political climate driving it, not just a philosophical argument that pops up out of nowhere.
Yeah.
What are the main arguments Axios details from the senators who want to cut that funding?
Yeah. Axios lays out several points pretty clearly. One major argument is that today's media world is just huge. It's incredibly diverse. So senators on this side argue maybe public funding just isn't necessary anymore. They suggest that, commercial media companies, private donors, they can support news and educational shows perfectly well, making government funding, in their view, an inefficient use of tax dollars. There's also the question of bias or perceived bias in some content. The argument there is taxpayers shouldn't have to fund outlets if they disagree with the viewpoints presented. Axios actually quotes a senator calling it basically an outdated subsidy, saying the industry should be able to support itself now.
Okay, that's the fiscal responsibility angle, the stand on your own feet argument. How does Axios then present the other side? The case for keeping public funding, what's the public service argument look like?
Right. The counterargument, as Axios reports it, really focuses on the idea that NPR and PBS fill gaps. Critical gaps, they'd say, gaps left by the commercial media market. Proponents argue they offer things like in-depth journalism that isn't driven by ratings or ads. Think about educational shows for kids and adults, local news coverage that commercial outlets might ignore because it's not profitable. Axios mentions examples like PBS documentaries on science or history or NPR's investigative work. The argument is this kind of content might not even exist or certainly wouldn't reach as many people without that federal seed money. So for this side, public service means investing in an informed public in education. The payoff isn't just dollars and cents, it's societal. And they also stress the reach, getting into rural areas, places where commercial media options might be scarce.
Okay, this is where it gets really practical. Does Axios get into the nuts and bolts of the funding, like how the money actually works, beyond just the CPB label, and what kinds of cuts are we actually talking about?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The article makes a key distinction. Federal money doesn't go straight to NPR headquarters or PBS headquarters. It goes to the CPB, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. And then the CPB gives out grants to individual local public radio and TV stations all across the country. That structure, it was actually designed that way on purpose, to act as a kind of firewall against direct political meddling in programming. As for the proposals Axios mentions, they vary. Some are talking about, gradual cuts to the appropriations like we've seen proposed before. But there are also more drastic calls mentioned recently, calls to completely phase out CPB funding over just a few years. Axios points to one specific bill, for example, that would cut the CPB's roughly $495 million annual funding in half next year, and then eliminate it entirely within 3 years. The argument being those funds could go to other national needs.
Wow, okay. So it really is a fundamental clash. One side sees it as sort of unnecessary government spending in a rich media environment. The other sees it as a crucial investment in things like education, serious journalism, and reaching everyone. It really forces a conversation about what we even mean by public good when it comes to information today.
Precisely. Axios really drives that home. This whole debate, it's much bigger than just the budget numbers for NPR and PBS. It forces us to ask a really fundamental question. In today's world, with information coming at us from everywhere, what is the role for media that's funded by the public? And how do we, as a society, figure out what counts as a public good worth supporting with tax dollars when it comes to news and shows?
So, thinking about you, the listener, what does all this boil down to? This whole discussion, laid out by Axios, it kind of prompts you to think, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Where do you get your information? What kind of media do you value? And how does government funding, or the lack of it, potentially shape that whole landscape? We've tried to lay out the arguments from the source, show you why this is being debated so intensely in the Senate right now, the core points on both sides. But the question Axios leaves hanging, and maybe the one for you to chew on, is, what responsibility, if any, do you think the government has in shaping our media world? And what could that mean down the road for places like NPR and PBS? We've given you the context from Axios. Now, the deeper thinking, well, that's up to you.